We at Oddschecker are delighted to be at Newmarket, where we are visiting Charlie Fellows, one of the UK's top and brightest training talents. He's going to be talking us through his season so far in 2017. We'll also be looking at some of the key and contentious talking points ahead of the all-weather season, and then Charlie will be taking us through some of the horses that he'll be campaigning over the winter. So Charlie, 25 winners from 177 runners so far in 2017. How do you feel the year's gone for you so far?
Pretty happy, pretty happy. We had an amazing year last year. We had an 18% strike rate. We had 25 winners, so same number as we've had this year, but at a better strike rate. This year was always going to be tough because it was a bit of a transitional year, and my youngsters last year, I think, were only an average bunch. And it proved it this year. So turning 3, and the 3-year-olds are the most important bunch you've got. So it was always going to be tough, and therefore I'm pretty happy. 25 winners is not bad in it. We've got 6 weeks left of the year, so we're going to beat it. I really wanted a group winner or a big winner, and we've just fallen short there. Prince of Arran was second in the Sagaro, but I think the future's bright.
And in 2017 so far, what would you say has been, the highlight of your year?
Highlight was Endless Acres, without doubt. Royal Ascot for me is the pinnacle of racing in this country. Actually, I think racing globally, it's phenomenal. Endless Acres obviously finished second in the Ascot Stakes on the first day, behind what will probably come out as being the best handicapped horse that ran at Royal Ascot in Thomas Hobson. Sadly, the highs and lows of horse racing were encapsulated in one horse, because we then took the very brave decision to put him away, which I'm still adamant was the right decision, and it was not the reason he broke down. But we wanted to put him away. He had a very hard race at Ascot, and he'd had quite a hard early season. I think that was his 4th run. So we gave him a break, turned him out, brought him back, and he obviously broke down with 2 furlongs to go in the Cesarovic when travelling ominously well and looking like we were the only horse that could give Roger Charlton's horse a race. I'm not saying we would have beaten them, but I'm saying I'm 99.9% sure we would have finished 2nd or 1st. He's a very, very good stayer, and losing him is a massive hole in the yard, because I really think he would have been even better next year.
So you talk about Endless Acres, who's obviously a very popular horse. I think the same can be said of Wet Sail, Prince of Arran, the top horses you've had in your yard. But you've mentioned the need for that group horse. Are there any currently here that you think could be at that level?
Of the older horses, I still have high hopes for Prince of Arran. I think he needs to prove himself away from Kempton and Ascot. But if you looked at the way he travelled through the Gold Cup and how the way he ran coming into that home bend, you could, he was going as well as anything, and he really was going as well as anything, and he just didn't get home. Since then, he was frustrating, and we encountered cutting the ground at Goodwood and then at York and Salisbury. He's going to head out to Dubai, where the stayers races are not rattling hot, and the ground should be quick, and he could, if he's going to prove it anyway, he'll hopefully prove it out there, and the plan will be to run on World Cup night if he's good enough. But he's going to go out middle of January and run in a couple of prep races before then, and go out there for the whole carnival. So I still have hopes for him, but he is quirky, and he's got a lot to prove at the moment. I think the future lies in the 2-year-olds. The 2-year-olds look like a really smart bunch. And there's been a lot of promise with the younger horse in the yard, and they've run very well. Escalator ran a lovely race at Leicester before being beaten around Wolverhampton, but he finished 2nd and ran with a huge amount of credit. Lovely big horse ran at Newmarket last time out, called Jeremiah, who's enormous and is only going to get better. Lady of Arran got beaten in a course record time the other day and by a nose. I think she's going to be pretty smart next year. And there are others too. We run a nice horse next week called the Bear Fighter, and there's a few unraced ones that should be more than up to winning decent races. So whereas last year I was going into the winter slightly scratching my head as to where the quality was in the future. This year, there's a huge amount of positivity, and I think the 2-year-olds turning 3 could be a really nice bunch.
As a young trainer, and having worked as an assistant previously, how do you think all-weather racing has changed the last kind of decades, and how do you think it's benefiting or otherwise, young trainers at the moment?
Look, it's clearly been. I personally, I think it's a huge benefit to racing. I think there's a line, and I worry about the line being crossed. But the benefits, first of all, are that there is now not so much pressure to get runs into 2-year-olds on the turf and push them too hard, because, as Mr. Gosden has shown over the last few years, you can introduce some very, 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 very good horses on the all-weather, and it just means you can give them that little bit more time to develop without having to wait until the spring to go again. I had Prince of Arran in the finals last year. He won quite a lot of prize money on the all-weather over the winter. So, it's very good in that sense. And I've actually deliberately held back a couple to aim at the races this year. Caroline and I will have another crack again, and a few others. So no, I think it's good, but they have to be really, really, really careful that they don't start doing too much of it. And I don't mean too many fixtures. What I mean is, like us, well, not me in particular, but the lads, stable lads, work unbelievably hard, and it's a very, very, very tough job with long hours. It's well documented at the moment that there is a shortage of people coming in to work in racing. And one of the main things that the stable lads don't like is coming back and getting home at midnight, or having to go and work, go racing on a Saturday or a Sunday when they're meant to be having their weekend off. Yeah. And I just really hope that common sense prevails, and that we don't start getting more and more late night racing and more weekend racing, because it's going to hurt us. The crisis surrounding people coming in to work in racing is the biggest problem racing has faced in years. It's bigger than prize money, it's bigger than anything like that. There isn't a yard in Newmarket that would happily come forward and say, I've got enough lads to do the job. And sooner or later, they push it further and further, there is going to be no product, because trainers aren't going to be able to survive. Wages are getting pushed up. Employment is getting less and less. It is a huge, huge, huge issue. And I don't think it's still appreciated quite how dangerous it is at the moment. I think a key thing going forward is going to be syndicates. And I'm delighted to see the BHA doing a big push on syndicates, because that makes it way more affordable. I mentioned a horse called the Bear Fighter, who I've got running next week for the first time. 80% of the syndicate that make him up are under the age of 30. And it is a way to dip your toe in, not spend a vast amount of money, and work out whether racehorse ownership is for you. And hopefully, through him, we're going to have plenty of fun. He looks like quite a decent horse, and we're going to be able to go racing, and they'll enjoy it. And some of them may say, well, I'll go into another syndicate next year. Some of them may even say, off the back of that, I want to buy a horse. So that's really important. I think racing has embraced social media as another key part. Social media is obviously very attractive to a young audience. I think racing has been ahead of the game in that department for a number of years. So I think there's lots of things going on, and obviously a very contentious issue is the bans after racing. Yeah. A lot of people are not big fans. Personally, I think that it's a great idea, and I think if you have a band playing after racing, and of the 10,000 crowd, 5 come away thinking, God, you know what, the band were great, but I also really love the racing. Yeah. I might look into going again or go into a syndicate or something like that. Job done. Yeah, job done.
And another contentious issue, moving on from that one, is Kempton Park Racecourse. As we've mentioned, it's a track where you've had probably, you know, in terms of volume, your greatest success. It's set to be closed down and replaced just down the road by an all-weather track in Newmarket. What are your, I mean, it must be bittersweet for you having that possible new track over the winter just down the road, but also losing such a prestigious and successful for you course.
It is a really difficult one, this one, because initially when I heard about it, I was a big fan. And I thought it was a great idea. And I thought that although Kempton is a fantastic, fair, all-weather track, you go there 9 times out of 10 it's empty, apart from the owners and trainers room. I'll add that in, apart from the owners and trainers room, which is normally always packed. And so initially I thought, cash in. What's the point in having it? We can do it in Newmarket, have the same crowd, take the 200 million. I know they said 100, it ain't gonna be 100. It's gonna be a hell of a lot more if they get the whole thing. And you know, do it somewhere that's far more convenient to the majority of owners in England, etc., etc. And I still, to an extent, do feel that way. I do feel like it is a golden egg that we should be cashing in on. But there is one thing that every time I look at the picture as a whole that really nags me, and that is that issue of the owners and trainers room being full every time. And the thing is, we have more racing at Kempton than any other track in the country. And it is the most easily accessible for a vast majority of pretty wealthy people. It is in one of the most affluent areas of the country where our owners are going to come from, or do come from. And is therefore moving a track where we have more racing than anywhere else up to Newmarket, where it's a good hour and a half, 2 hours drive. It takes me, when the traffic's bad, 2 hours to get there along around the M25. Is that a really good idea? And are we potentially putting off a lot of owners who love going racing because it's 15, 20 minutes down the road and probably aren't going to travel 2 hours to go?
And just finally, so many all-weather courses to choose from now, from Newcastle, Chelmsford, Wolves, Lingfield, Kempton. As a trainer, how do you choose where you're placing your horses? What goes through your mind in working out? Is it as simple as which race looks like it's going to suit the most, or do you have certain horses for courses, you could say?
I think you definitely have horses for courses. I still think that there is too much of a bias, especially around Lingfield and Wolverhampton. I think if you have an inside draw at those two tracks, you are at a huge advantage. Kempton, not quite such an issue. Newcastle, even less of an issue. Kempton's my track. Yeah. I think it's incredibly fair, 9 times out of 10. It's convenient, and I think 9 times out of 10, best horse wins. This is Caroline, and she is our all-weather stable star. She's a remarkable filly. She weighs over 500 kilos, and she's bred to be a 2-miler, yet last time out she ran over 6 furlongs in a listed race. She's got a most fantastic attitude, loves racing, and she's pretty versatile, especially on the all-weather, where you get away with running over further than maybe she might get. The programme for fillies on the all-weather over the winter is very good, and there's a huge amount of prize money up for grabs. She won short of 60 grand last winter, and I'm really looking forward to a good winter with her and hopefully winning plenty more prize money. This is Prince of Arran. He's the highest rated horse in the yard. He's rated 104. He was rated 107 after the Sagaro. He finished second at Ascot in the Sagaro Stakes, which was a Group 3. He then went to the Gold Cup, ran a huge race in the Gold Cup, before running down the field in the Goodwood Cup and the Doncaster Cup. He's got loads of talent, but he's also got his quirks, and he's now going to be prepared to go out to Dubai in January, where hopefully he'll run 3 times before heading there for World Cup night. Jam won 4 races in a row, starting at Haydock on bottomless ground. He then went to Kempton, then headed to Leicester before finishing the run-off at Yarmouth. He is a big, late maturing horse, and he's just taken a very long time to come to hand and strengthen up. He has always been very good looking. He was bought for a lot of money as a yearling, so it's no surprise that he's developed into a very nice type. I think that there's more winning in the tank, and he seems to like the all-weather, so we'll carry on for the moment. He's still very lightly raced, but he's a nice horse, and I'm looking forward to a winter with him. This is Captain Navarre. He came to me halfway through the year. He'd had an injury, and he ran first time out over 1.5 miles at Leicester, where he had a nice comeback run. He then went to York over 2 miles. He never really picked up the bridle until the race was all over, and then he ran on strong at the end. I decided to put a visor on him back at home, and it made a huge amount of difference. There is a 2-mile race at Wolverhampton at the beginning of December, and the plan will be to send him there, and hopefully he can really start to climb the ladder in the stayers ranks, and if we're good enough, go to the all-weather championship finals at the end of the year. This is Spun Gold. He shows a lot more at home than he has done on the track. I don't feel like I've got him right yet. He ran really well first time out on the turf at Lingfield over 7 furlongs. We then stepped him up to 1 mile. He's had a bit of an easy time since, and we'll find a race for him in the next couple of weeks. Probably put some headgear on him, and we'll probably think about dropping back to 7 furlongs again. And I do have faith that we're going to get the best out of him, and he should definitely be one to follow through the next few months. This is the Bear Fighter, not a name that's familiar to many of you. He's never run before, but he's a big colt by Society Rock. This fella's a big backward horse. He's taken a lot of time to come to hand, but over the last month, he's really started to blossom and develop. I'd say he's very unlikely to be winning first time out, but he'll run a few times on the all-weather over the winter, and I really hope that he'll be winning at some point. He's got a lovely attitude and could make into a really nice 3-year-old next year. If you're thinking of backing him, please make sure you check Oddschecker first.